Greetings from the Scottish Highlands. Hello everyone. I wanted to share with you today about doing what the Lord says. So I'm going to be reading from the parable of the wise man and the foolish man. I'm just out here in our cottage back garden at the moment, in the Highlands with these beautiful mountains behind me. But in Matthew 7:24 to 27, it says, "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice," this is Jesus speaking, "is like a wise man who builds his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundations on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash." What really struck me reading that passage was that the foolish man who built his house on the sand was not some worldly person who was just going their own way. They were someone who heard the word. And we know from John 10 that we are God's sheep and we hear his voice, and a stranger's voice we won't follow. So we know this was someone who had a relationship with the Lord, and they actually heard his word, but they just didn't, for whatever reason, put it into practice. And I think that's a real warning, because I know for myself, if I'm struggling to hear the Lord on something, if I'm seeking wisdom, when I feel like I eventually get some clarity from the Lord, it's such a huge relief and it's such a joy that sometimes you can kind of almost stop there. And even when you get an instruction, you can be so kind of pleased just to have heard from God, because isn't it wonderful when we hear from God, especially when we're seeking him on a particular issue? But we need to remember that hearing from God is not an end in itself. This passage actually follows immediately from a passage where it talks about the true and false disciple, where it says that it says, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven." So the distinguishing factor between the wise man and the foolish man was not the hearing, it was the doing. It was the doing. Sorry, I just got a library bus going down the hill behind me. We're in a quite remote area. So it was the doing. The difference between the wise man and the foolish man was the wise man did something with the word that he had heard, and the foolish man didn't. And that is what made the difference between whether their house fell or stood. The other thing I discovered was that sand is decomposed rock. So the wise man put into practice and did what the Lord said, and he built his house on a rock. So he was in a stable, strong, firm place. The foolish man also heard what the Lord said, but he didn't actually apply it. He didn't actually do it. He might have intended to do it, he might have planned to do it, but at the end of the day, he didn't actually do it. And so that rock, the revelation that was intended to make him stable and strong and secure and able to withstand every storm, actually shifted beneath him, because he didn't do with it what it was given to him for. And that reminds me of in James 1:22-25, it says, "Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves." We can actually deceive ourselves by listening to the word. We are so spoiled by the plethora of teaching and prophesying and content that is available to us now as believers across the internet. But it's not the hearing that produces, it's the doing. And we actually deceive ourselves. It's not even the enemy who deceives us. We deceive ourselves when we don't put it into practice, when we merely listen to the word. So it says, do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in a mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. That's quite a comical picture, isn't it? But whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, not forgetting what they heard, but doing it, they will be blessed in what they do. The blessing is in what you do. It says that God blesses the work of our hands, but our hands have to actually do something. Sometimes we can feel like we're waiting on God, but He's actually waiting on us. And as we're listening, need to be asking God, what is my responsibility here? What do I need to do to partner with this word? What is the activity that you require from me? What are the instructions? And then do them. And often the doing might not be as exciting as the hearing, or it might be exciting initially, but it's the doing that produces. So I just want to encourage you all today, do what He says. The blessing is in the doing what He says. So go do it. Lord, help us not to be merely listeners who deceive ourselves, but let us be those who put into practice the word that you give us so that we are wise men and women and not foolish ones.